Alright, so this is going to be our third video in the How to Get Rich crafting series. I'm going to make a couple changes here. The video is going to be a little shorter, quite a bit shorter actually. I was finding I was just throwing too much information in one video for it to be digestible. So this video is going to cover the kind of fundamental rotations that I've found that really will help you out. And then also I'll just briefly talk about macros, but it's going to be just a kind of a quick touch on it because I actually find macros to be kind of bad for you. I'll explain that. Alright, so first off, here's where we're at. It's been a bit of a delay since my last video, and that's because I've been busy getting my Paladin raid ready. So that's taken up a lot of my attention, but I'm back to crafting quite a bit more now, especially because our free company is getting pretty expensive. So on that note, if I only have 277,000 gil and the video series is about how to get rich crafting, it's because that's freaking expensive, especially when you're giving away 50k for every new member on the free company. So that's why, and we're going to actually go ahead and, as kind of a fun way of changing this up, we're going to look at kind of what my process is. So I actually took a look and figured out this was going to be a good time to record this. So at the start of the day, let's say, you know, it's the weekend and I'm able to sell things nice and quick. We're going to go in and I'm typically going to say, okay, what sold since yesterday? So I would go to my transaction history and say, okay, Velveteen work gloves selling really fast. Those I want to restock right away because I can already tell you at first glance, I know those sold out because I made about that many. There might be one left at most. So when you look at your history, you're going to see what sold out and you're just going to remake it. Generally speaking, you're going to just make whatever still gives a bit of experience, but you want it to be trivial enough that you can consistently make it high quality. So I'm done with cotton these days, but I'm making quite a bit of velveteen still just because that treats me pretty well. So I already have it pulled up here, but as a way of kind of demonstrating from the ground up what your crafting rotations are going to look like, we'll start actually with the undyed velveteen. So let's say we look at this and we say, we'd actually rather use some high quality for this, just to make sure we get a high quality success on the work gloves. So then that's the point. We would go back to our undyed velveteen, and probably the most basic rotation you're going to want to use is, well actually first you'll want your food, that would help. I'm operating under the assumption that you are at least level 21 and that you have unlocked manipulation or waste not, optimally both, and I'll talk about that here in a bit. But the first rotation you're going to want to learn is for any of these components. And it's very quick, very straightforward. You're just going to hit Inner Quiet, and actually I'm going to click these so you can see what I'm doing. Normally I would use all hotkeys. Inner Quiet, then Great Strides, and I covered this a little bit in the last video. Steady Hand, then Standard Touch. And now we just look up top, we're going to have another Great Strides, Standard Touch. Wash, rinse, repeat one more time, and we're ready to complete the item. Now notice, this is really important to keep in mind. I'm only at 92%. Technically, yes, I could pop Rumination, and I could probably get this to 100% pretty easily, especially if I pop Rumination, then use Waste Not, finish the item. The goal with this rotation is not to hit 100% every time. It's to hit a good enough quality that you're going to be consistently hitting high quality. 80% plus, I'd say, is a pretty good standard for that. So since I'm at 92%, I'm going to say, okay, let's finish it. Now, you always want this to be something where you can careful synthesis in one shot. So I'm also operating under the assumption that you grabbed Weaver, because everyone should be grabbing Weaver. So I got unlucky. I hit that 8%. Told me, okay, you're not going to get a high quality undyed velveteen. So just keep running it, and your goal again is to run this rotation as quickly as possible. So here I actually won't click this one to give you a little better idea of how this can go. So then we'll do the same exact thing. Notice I'm ignoring any opportunity to use tricks of the trade because my goal is to run this rotation as quickly as possible. My goal is not to make an optimal quality. So that time only got to 31%. That's not so good. And that's because usually when I'm doing undyed velveteen, I've already got my, whatever it's called, the thread that you use in this, I'm already using high quality. So I'm used to this actually hitting 100% every time because I'm using high quality thread. This time I didn't, but go ahead and finish it just for the sake of kind of demonstrating how that should go. So That's really important for you to keep in mind, is you want to know which items you need to at all costs get 100% and which items you can afford to take to 80 or 90% and then call it good enough. And you just crank them out manually because, for one, it's really good experience compared to using quick synthesis. Much, much better. And for two, it's not really going to benefit you if you take an extra 10 to 15 steps to get 100% because you're constantly reacting to tricks of the trade and you're popping rumination and you're just trying to eke every little bit out of it. If you're taking 10 to 15 extra steps, then you really got to look at the big picture and say, if I'm making 100 undyed velveteen, is it really going to benefit me to get an extra 10 high quality more out of it, 10 more that are high quality out of it, but I take 3 times as long? So that's why this is the first rotation you want to learn, really good for any of your components. The next rotation you'll want to learn is for the exact opposite, and that is when it absolutely must be 100%. So for example, now we're ready to make velveteen work gloves, which actually we don't have any undyed velveteen, but that's fine. That'll be a perfect example, or any high quality. So we're ready to make these velveteen work gloves, and we need this to be 100% no matter what. I like a combination of waste, knot, and manipulation. So first, you're going to go for inner quiet. Whoops, back to clicking. And then you're going to pop tricks of the trade pretty much any opportunity you get, except for under one specific circumstance. So we'll look at that here in a sec. So we're ready for another tricks of the trade. We're just trying to keep our CP as high as possible. Then steady hand, then waste knot. So the order there is inner quiet, then steady hand, then waste knot. This is just for the open. This is like an opener to the rotation. I know, really weird to think about for crafting, but that's just how much depth there is to this. Now you're just going to spam out hasty touch and cross your fingers. You're only doing a 70% success rate here, so this is where there's a little bit of luck to it, but this is actually really, really efficient over a long enough timeline. Okay, so we had a tricks of the trade come up. And just to give you some overall idea, generally tricks of the trade, when you have waste knot and steady hand active, it's going to gain you, off the top of my head, I think it's like 3 or 4 CP compared to if you were to just hasty touch through it. But on the first one, that's not the case. The reason for that is because right now we're at 55 out of 70 durability. And if you go to, for example, -5 durability, it's no different than if you go to 0 durability when you're finishing an item. So that being said, for this one time, I'm not losing any of the potential from this waste knot when I use tricks of the trade, because my goal is to be at X5 out of 70 durability for this item, because that's effectively giving me one more attempt at finishing the item when I'm ready to synthesize. So for this one time, we're going to use our tricks of the trade. Excellent. Now I would say I'm only at 55 out of 70. We'll probably go ahead and use one more of this. So we'll go steady hand, then waste knot. Always in that order because you want them to line up. 4 and 4. So now we're ready to spam some more. Spam, spam, spam. And we're just getting our durability down as much as possible so that we're then ready for manipulation. Okay, so this is what I was kind of hoping would happen. This time, it's not really going to be as beneficial for me to pop tricks of the trade. And more importantly, I want to make sure I'm always staying at that X5 out of 70 durability so that I can capitalize on that first one I hit. So we'll just do another hasty touch, and it failed too bad. If you have a lot of extra CP, you could do a standard touch and make sure you capitalize on that good condition. That's up to you. In this situation though, since I'm going to be now switching over to manipulation spam, I want to just keep this going for as many steps as possible before I need to hit rumination. So now we're at 35 out of 70, and I like to make sure to get my durability down enough that if I get a series of tricks of the trade, I won't waste a manipulation, and you'll see how that could work here in a second. So now you want to switch it around. You want to hit manipulation first and then steady hand, and that's because if this happens, actually, this is a perfect crafting attempt to show all of this, you want to make sure you're not wasting a tick on your steady hand. So this happened. It's not wasting a tick on my manipulation. That occurs whether I use anything that lowers durability or not. So I can go ahead and use my tricks of the trade. And this is where this gets pretty cool. So now we're just trying to spam out as many hasty touches as possible while utilizing every single tricks of the trade we come across. Because you don't really lose anything. I mean, if you use it during a steady hand, you're losing a couple CP versus the 20 you would have gained. You're gaining like I guess you're gaining like 17 CP rather than 20. It's not that big of a deal. Maybe a little more than that. You're getting like 16.5. I don't know. I'm horrible at math, so don't listen to my numbers. But you get the idea. Generally speaking, you're going to, if you've got 5 attempts to use Steady Hand and you use one of them on a ability that doesn't lower or doesn't actually depend on a success rate, then you're losing 1/5 of the potential for Steady Hand. So that opportunity cost there, some of that was missed, or some of that you took to the chin, whatever you want to say. Alright, so we'll use another Tricks of the Trade, because either way, even if we're gaining 17-ish CP, that's still better than 0. So now we're at a point where I would really like to hit another Manipulation and then Steady Hand, but I can't. But I do have 35 out of 70, so you want to kind of look around and say, okay, what's my best situation? Well, technically, I can do, for 78 CP, I can do another Steady Hand and Waste Not combo, because I'd really like to get my quality to 100% before I do Rumination. But the other thing to keep in mind is if you're going to run your quality that low, you need to make sure you can finish the item without running out of durability. So I'm going to play it safe this time. I'm going to go ahead and pop my Rumination, because it's really hard to estimate what Rumination is going to give you, especially because you don't get a counter next to Inner Quiet, so you can't even do the math by looking at the counter. You'd have to actually be counting every success you've had. So now this is pretty comfortable. All I'm going to have to do actually is look at this and say, okay, one standard touch is going to finish this to 100%. So we're going to actually go ahead and do a Manipulation, and then we're going to do a Steady Hand, and we're just low, but we can go ahead and do a Tricks of the Trade, standard touch. Whoops, I promised I would click, sorry. Standard touch, we're ready to finish our item. I don't like that, but we're going to go ahead and finish it anyways. Rapid Synthesis I like a lot. It's a little bit unstable, but in any item that's going to take you more than 2 attempts, it's probably going to be better if it's going to one-shot it. So we'll go ahead and do a Rapid Synthesis. Excellent. That sucks. So that's why you want to make sure to get 100% at all costs. I was a little bit greedy. Technically, there was no reason not to go ahead and toss out a whatever basic touch and finish up that last 2%. But I was greedy, and I fell within that 2%, so that actually should be a good don't do what I just did. When you have deemed an item must high quality, make sure you do get it to 100% at all costs. It's the exact opposite of what we did previously. So, that being said, you may have 30 or 40 steps in a single crafting attempt, but if it makes the difference between this item, wherever it went, there we go, this item, which is going to sell for probably about 3 or 4K, basically I'm going to double my money, give or take. After the Diorite webs, it's probably about doubling my money, versus the high quality variety, which is going to sell for 10K. So obviously that's a pretty big difference in how much your time paid off. So those are the two. The second one, it's hard to even call a rotation because it's so reactionary, but the general idea is you want to make sure you are either using them in the first order, which is Inner Quiet, Steady Hand, and then Waste Not. And then once you hit your first Tricks of the Trade, then you're going to more than likely switch over to Manipulation, Steady Hand, and then back to Hasty Touch spam. The one thing to keep in mind is you want to make sure you switch to Manipulation late enough in the durability that you're not wasting some. Because if I hit Manipulation, then get a Tricks of the Trade, then hit Steady Hand, then get another Tricks of the Trade, and I was at 55 out of 70, I technically wasted the last tick on Manipulation because I overhealed the item. Also, I just put my durability back to an even number, back to X0, 70 in this case, rather than X5, which is what allows that little trick on Waste Not to pay off. So that's just kind of something to keep in mind when you're doing that. Again, I promised I'd keep these videos short, so if you want me to expand at all on how that second rotation works, let me know in the comments and I'll be happy to give a little better example of it. But the one last thing I want to show here is just a very basic macro. So I'm going to go to macros, and we looked a little bit ago at that macro that says, okay, we want to just make these items as fast as possible, and we're not worried about the durability or about the quality as long as it's over, say, 80%. So this is great when you have an item that is in that category and you're not quite needing as much, because the one thing you notice is missing here is the Inner Quiet And that's just based on a limitation. I'm at 15 lines out of 15, so this macro unfortunately has to skimp on something. You'll only be able to use this for items that you can one-shot with your careful synthesis, but other than that, it's going to treat you really well. Now, if you choose to go in and use Inner Quiet manually before you start the macro, then great. But I'm of the mindset where if you're going to make a macro, you might as well make sure you're only making things you can you can create entirely from that macro. So let's go to that Velveteen, wherever it was. Actually, do I have? No, I don't need it. Okay. So we're going to put a high quality in there, start it up, and this is how that macro is going to look when you're actually executing it. I'll put this in the comments as well for the video for anyone who would like to copy. No, actually I can't. I lie. The last time I tried to put a macro in the video, YouTube freaked out about it. So I'm sorry, I actually can't put this macro in the video comments. So I'll pull it up here when the video's ending, and that way you guys can have it up and you can just pause and can copy it over or type it over. Okay, so we're already at 9%. We would just click 8, start our macro, and then there you go. The downside is you're going to still have to be at the computer. You're still going to have to be doing this. It's not like Star Wars Galaxies where you could run a macro overnight that was going to repeat itself over and over and over and keep that crafting going. That's two reasons. Number one, I don't know of a way to macro the actual crafting attempt. So the part where you have to click craft, man, 91%, and I still fail it. Fail the HQ. No luck today. Anyways, the part where you click synthesize, I don't know of a macro command for that. If anyone does know of one, then cool. I'd love to see what I can do with it. The other part is you can't have a looping macro, so you can't actually connect this macro to the next instance of this macro, telling it to start over again. And you know, obviously Square probably did that for some very good reasons. They don't want people oversimplifying the game with their macros. So okay, I think I'm going to call it on this video. I want to see how this new format does with shortening things up a bit. The next video, I will probably be getting into materia. I talked a little bit about farming in the first video in this series, but I want to get into how you monetize your materia in a little more depth. Alright, so thanks a bunch for watching, guys. Be sure to subscribe if you liked the video, and let me know in the comments any ways I can improve this further. And here's the macro for you guys. Okay, have a good one.